Hell no. To the no, no, no. Hell to the no. Hell to the no. To the no, no, no. Hell no, no.
Welcome into the 615 Sessions podcast here on this Friday. We're happy to have you. It's Teresa Walker, the Associated Press, as this week's guest. It's always good to see T. Always good to see you guys and have you be a part of the podcast on this Friday, the last Friday before the NFL draft, Teresa, when we can finally crown Cameron Ward as the next quarterback of the Tennessee Titans. It's been an exhausting wait.
It has been. I mean, it's felt like a fait accompli since even before the season ended. And, you know, it's funny to see everybody else nationally come on board with the idea, oh, the Titans are going to take Cam Ward. And it's like, yeah, did you not see the quarterback play last season? The guy was actually benched.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think most people of reasonable and sound mind stopped watching the Titans after a certain point, basically after October. So
we were paid to watch.
How bad it went on the onset, but they may not know how bad it continued to get throughout the course of that season that would see this team end up with the number one overall draft pick and falling well below their projected Vegas win total of 6.5 in 2024.
I know, and it's why after last spring I was saying, well, there's no way that the offensive line play can get worse. I've learned my lesson. I'm not going to say this anymore. I'm going to make them prove to me that they can get this right with the new GM, the new people added to the front office, and all the things that they've done to try to change, improve, fix this situation. But you know what? Right now I'm from Missouri. Show me, baby.
Amen. And that's kind of, I think that's the space where most Titans fans are operating at this point, Teresa. There's just not a reason to trust them until they give you one again. And that's, incumbent upon Brian Callahan and Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker and Bert Nyhill and Amy Adams Strunk and everybody else involved with this organization to get it up off the mat. And we know that the number one overall pick is a good place to start. I did want to talk to you this week because you had some great reporting for the Associated Press about a situation with L'Jarius Sneed that arose, a lawsuit that he is currently embroiled in, and allegations of he or his assistant shooting at someone in a parked car in a parking lot in Texas, and the details of which are pretty concerning, though most of it sounds like, based on the police report that you were able to get through the Freedom of Information Act, redacted, which makes it a kind of difficult situation to figure out what the actual football ramifications of this might be for the Titans' number one corner.
Well, the fact the Titans did issue a statement, and I added that to my story. Of course, I got that right after I'd filed the story, but that they are aware, working with NFL security. And that's the thing. This happened, and there was an arrest. There's a civil lawsuit that was filed in February, but there was also an arrest of L'Jarius Sneed. I now know his middle name. I didn't have to look it up on Pro Football Reference, Yusuf. But that's the thing. The charge was aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. And that, that one thing that you can't tell from the report, who was driving, there is a still picture taken from surveillance video, because this was in the daylight hours of December 6th in Texas. And, mistaken identity, the attorney that represents the man who filed the civil lawsuit. This is a person who, this is a known attorney in the state of Texas. This is a guy who is known in the NFL circles. He has done some work for Jerry Jones. All you have to do is Google his name, Levi McCatherine, and you can tell this is, it's not somebody who works out of a storefront who's looking to make a name for himself. This is somebody who has a reputation. So there was a charge, there was an arrest, and there's a civil lawsuit asking for at least $1 million. I'll say this, from the bullets that, were found in the car and parts of the dealership, it's kind of a miracle that no one was hurt in this, let alone possibly killed, as we talk about this the day after the shooting incident at Florida State University. So it's one of those situations that there, but for the grace of God. But, that's the thing. Where can, there's the civil lawsuit. I haven't been able to see what level the charges are at this point, in what stage they're at in Texas. But the fact of the matter is, the biggest punishment might come from the NFL in the form of, does he face a suspension for this? They're trying, Brian Callahan talked in March about how he's working to be healthy, all the things that he's done to get that quad muscle fixed up and healthy. Well, what happens if the NFL says there's a 2, 4, or 6 game suspension for what happened on the afternoon of December 6th in Texas? That's the big unknown. And he's a guy who's at near the top of their cap list for how much he's going to cost them this year. A guy they need to be a starting cornerback in their secondary for this defense and this team to take a step in the right direction.
Yeah, that cap hit spikes from just over $9 million in 2024 to over 20 in 2025, and a suspension may allow the Titans to recoup some of the financial losses that they've invested in L'Jarius Sneed at this point in time. But it's one thing after another with this team, Teresa. And I know not all of these things are connected, and Will Levis's implosion is not related to L'Jarius Sneed's legal troubles or quad injury, quad bruise that became a strain that all of a sudden we need bone marrow injections and a surgical procedure to get it right. And this all, by the way, happens while he's on injured reserve with the team. And it's not uncommon, of course, maybe fans don't know this, it's not uncommon for players on injured reserve to be away from the team because especially somebody with a long-term situation like Sneed, nothing he can really do. Maybe you want him in the meeting rooms, maybe you want him around the facility. I don't know, but there's nothing from a football application standpoint that he can really do. So that's not the thing that that pops up or that was as polarizing for us as it seemed to be for fans. It's the fact that he's embroiled in any kind of situation, even adjacent to this, whether it was he or his assistant, as is being alleged. And then your reporting went on to indicate that either he or his mother, or allegedly both, had some level of contact with the victim, trying to pressure him into not going to police on this. And it took until February, again, as the report noted on the AP's website. You can check Teresa's reporting out on Twitter as well, if you so choose, that the lawsuit itself was not filed until just before the combine, if I'm not mistaken.
February 20th. And that's the thing. Yes, that's what the civil suit lawsuit alleges, is that, and yes, I see Mike Bell's comment. There was an arrest, but the report is mostly redacted. So it's really tough to see exactly what happened, aside from the civil lawsuit, which, includes the still picture from the surveillance video, the allegation that Sneed and or his mother both called this young man in the hours and days after the shooting, pressuring him, don't go to the cops, don't talk to anybody. That's what they allege. And, and yes, is this a he said, she said to an extent? Yes. But again, daylight hours, surveillance video. And in the picture in that civil lawsuit, you can see they draw a circle literally around the hand sticking out of the Lamborghini SUV. And it appears to be a pistol in it. And they recovered bullets from the scene. So, was Sneed behind the wheel? Was he the person allegedly holding the gun out the window? Those questions have not been answered. I reached out to his agents, texted them, emailed them, no comment. And I did finally get a comment from the Titans. So it's a murky situation. Why? Well, when you're paying somebody as much money as he is due this year, even if they get some relief if he's suspended, he is expected to be a cornerstone of that secondary, because let's not forget, it's still very young. Jarvis Brownlee going into his second season. Roger McCreary is among the veterans at this point in that secondary room. And Sneed was brought in to be a big piece of that defense. And he's been mostly seen and not heard.
Yeah. And certainly, even when we did hear from him, it left more questions than answers when he finally reappeared in the locker room. And I think the week before week 18, in the week of practice leading up to week 18, Teresa, where he kind of disclosed some of the medical situation that's been going on. And then that's really as much exposure as we had with L'Jarius Sneed since week 6, when the injury initially occurred. So, obviously the legal situation is ongoing. There will be an NFL investigation that will be informed by the legal proceeding, but will be independent of the legal proceeding. The NFL will make its own investigation and determine their own punishment based on the NFL collective bargaining agreement and things of that nature, based on what level of suspension this draws and what his actual violations according to the league were. But to transition into a football conversation, Teresa, this I think impacts their draft, because they cut Cheeto Awuzie. L'Jarius Sneed you have no idea. And even then, like, I'm not riding. I'm assuming he's not going to see the life of this 4-year deal. You know what I'm saying? Based on how this situation has gone, maybe that's an unfair assumption, but based on what we're working with, both on the field and off the field, feels like a pretty safe bet. And then there's Roger McCreary in a contract here. I almost think they have to draft a corner, Teresa, and I don't think that's on the list of needs that a lot of Titans fans would have, given how much money they invested in this secondary over the course of the last calendar year.
Well, if I'm remembering the Sneed deal, I think there's an out after this season. So, you know, and agreed. I mean, you've got Roger McCreary playing for a new deal. Usually you have to get a cornerback every year. They're kind of like an offensive lineman. It's like you go to the grocery store, you're getting bread, eggs, you know, you've got your staples. In an NFL draft, a cornerback, an offensive lineman, a defensive lineman, a linebacker, those are kind of like the necessities that you have to, the staples that you have to make sure you come out of a draft with. Now, this could push that higher up on the requirement list. Honey, don't forget, Mike, don't forget that you've got to get a cornerback out of this draft before it's over. So don't wait till the 6th round or the 7th round to go find something at that position. Don't, you know, it's like run to aisle 8 right now. Second, you know, try to get into the 3rd. We've been so focused on quarterback, wide receiver, edge rusher, but I do agree. I think cornerback is probably right behind there with the veterans that they added yesterday on the offensive line for depth. I think that allows them to address cornerback a lot sooner than they might have before the additions of the 3 veterans. They may not be big names or impressive, but they have played a lot of games. They've started some games, and they have been, what's the biggest word in the NFL? Available. And that's something that the Titans are needing to address. Get players that can be available. You can't get better unless you've got players that you can actually count on being there week in and week out. So cornerback absolutely has risen up the ladder of must needs when they go shopping next week in the draft.
And God knows they need just about everything. And even the stuff that they don't need, they could stand to add some depth pieces at. Teresa Walker is here hanging out with us on the 615 Sessions podcast. The podcast is presented by Zen Sports. Promo code ATOZTN gets you in on all the action. NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, Major League Baseball going on right now. Betting just gets better at Zen Sports. Use that promo code. Terms and conditions do apply. Gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. Must be 21 plus and in the state of Tennessee to bet. Brett on Facebook, where we are live streaming the podcast, if you are live with us today, says Rand Carthon put the team in a huge hole after his spending spree. This team was in a hole, Teresa. Rand Carthon, I've talked to Brian Callahan on and offline about this. They had no choice but to spend the money because they didn't have their own players to spend money on. So I know Rand may not have been good enough at the job. I don't dispute that. He may not have done enough in his 2 years, his 2 off seasons to jumpstart this thing because there's not a superstar anywhere in Rand Carthon's draft classes yet, as far as we can tell. But the hole that they were in, as we transition to our next topic, they were put in by John Robinson's last 3 drafts, where, Teresa, there's only 6 players remaining from John Robinson's tenure, a tenure that spanned from 2016 to 2022, 7 off seasons with many, many drafts, 7 drafts in between there, only 6 players remaining, and only 3 of them remaining are from between 2020 and 2022. They're all from that 2022 class, and only one of those is a good player in Roger McCreary's. They cut Nicholas Petit-Frere yesterday. So the whole, maybe Rand Carthon didn't have a big enough shovel to dig them out of the hole that John Robinson put them in. But it is indisputably on John Robinson on a couple of different things, but primarily on John Robinson, the fact that this team is still trying to dig the hell out.
Absolutely. You cannot miss in the draft as heavily as they did between 20 and 22. And, you can use the pandemic excuse for 20, right? But, and maybe that excuses the Isaiah Wilson pick. But what about the Caleb Farley, Dylan Radins, and things like that? I mean, you have to get players that you keep on your roster at least for the 4 years that you have them under a rookie deal. And Rand takes all the blame for the spending spree. Excuse me, you don't think that was run by the other people in the building and the people above him? I mean, it's not like he was out there, hitting the bank account and spending and not, keeping everybody in the loop. There was a plan in place, and he was the scapegoat where they tried to, where's the scapegoat come from? You put all the troubles on him and send him out of town, trying to, cleanse the town of all the woes. And they hope that doing that with Rand does it, but they are still paying the John Robinson costs of the too many whiffs. And, yes, when you don't have players because you whiffed on drafts, you have to overspend in free agency. Why have we heard the biggest phrase this offseason? Draft, develop, retain. That's how you get good in the NFL. You draft well, you retain that talent, and after you've developed them. And that's why you want to be signing guys to second-year deals. When John Robinson had good players, they re-signed Taylor Lewan, Derrick Henry, and Kevin Byard, and made them for a brief periods of time the highest paid players at their positions. And that's what the new Titans management is hoping to do. But yeah, he got dropped in a ditch, and the spending spree didn't help. So that's where the Titans, they're trying to clear some cap space so that they can have some room to maneuver. But, they're going to have to try to hit, they may not be able to hit 1,000 in this upcoming draft, but they are going to have to get at least 3 starters out of this draft, some key depth pieces, and try to hit on just about each of the 8 picks that they currently have, however many they end up using or trading up. And no, I don't address cornerback before, at around their second round pick, because wide receiver remains a massive need on this team. So does edge rusher, but I put cornerback right after that.
Yeah, I mean, it cannot be overstated. And I was doing the primetime show last night, Teresa, and I had Ross go back and find the video of John Robinson. I think it was courtesy of Fox 17 down here at the 2022 Combine. This was, of course, before the A.J. Brown trade, when he breaks down in tears talking about the collapse in the postseason, the trust placed on him in ownership, and just everything that spiraled on him throughout the course of those last 3 off seasons and 3 seasons, really, where there was just tackle alone with NPF getting released yesterday. Isaiah Wilson, a first-round pick. Dylan Radin's a second-round pick. NPF, a third-round pick. 3 players in the top 100 of the 11 players in the top 100 that J-Rob had in those last 3 drafts at right tackle alone, and they still, just now, might have a right tackle because their left tackle is going to move to right, which is the position that he played in college in J.C. Latham. It's crazy that it's taken that long for them. It is crazy that they have been so remarkably bad at both tackle spots for this entire stretch since Jack Conklin walked, T.
Well, and that's the thing. And let's not forget, they let Jack Conklin walk because they chose not to pay him so that they could put money elsewhere. And they have more than paid the cost because then they made such poor choices. I mean, I flash back to that Indiana Jones scene. It's like, he chose poorly. And it's like, yeah, we saw this franchise just wither away into dust. And let's not forget Caleb Farley. I mean, that was a guy, first round cornerback. I still think that it feels like John Robinson got, the Jeff Simmons deal coming off an ACL and him starting and getting into the field in October as a rookie, almost kind of, it's almost like when you're a bettor, it's like you get a little addicted. It's like, oh, I got great value for that. Well, he's coming off an injury. I'm going to take Caleb Farley and it's going to pay off. No, it didn't. The poor kid, was just dealing with injury after injury. Hope he gets right. I think he's in Carolina still now, but it's like it just never worked here. And you can't whiff on so many 1s, 2s, 3s. Those are the guys who should be starting for you. And they just went over in that position for those drafts. And that's what put them in this mess. And it's just look to Washington, though. If you can make the right choices, you can be. This is the beauty of the NFL. You can get good in a hurry if you make the right decisions. I'm not saying, and this franchise is at a point that, Lord, if they can double their win total, that will be a step in the right direction. And that would still just be 6 wins for this season. That's how bad they've been now for 3 years.
Yeah, it's nonsense. Teresa, at some point, I keep telling Titans fans in the various audiences that I have at this point in time, I promise at some point you're not going to need everything on an NFL roster, but we ain't there yet. We got to get through this draft and then probably another one at this point in time. But Teresa Walker is always on the scene. She had great reporting for the Associated Press. You can read her report on L'Jarius Sneed's December arrest as a result of the allegations that he or his assistant were involved in a shooting situation in Texas in December, and the subsequent lawsuit that has now emerged after it was filed in February. Teresa, great job on that. Great job on the pod as always. Didn't think I'd get an Indiana Jones reference out of you too. We're talking shop, we're talking pop culture, but you know, T brings it strong every time she appears on the pod. Thank you so much for being here, T.
My pleasure. And God, I'm not even going to think it, but I hope that the light at the end of the tunnel isn't a train.